Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Let's go ahead and begin class with prayer this morning. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and study. We ask that you'll join us, enlighten our minds, help us draw closer to you, and make us effective to share this message of mercy to the world, because we can see all around us the signs that you're coming soon. Give us wisdom as we discuss those signs today in our class. We pray in your holy name. Amen. Amen. So just a couple announcements. As you know, we started a new podcast, Designed for More. And so far we're getting very positive feedback, and it is actually pushing out into new audiences and new networks that we have not reached before. So keep our podcast in your prayers. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll be able to share it with people in your network as well. And then the Christ and His Bride magazine is now available in Afrikaans for people in South Africa. You can download the PDF for that from our website, and or check with Jacques in South Africa at comeandreason.com if you're in South Africa and would like to pursue a hard copy of that. We're doing lesson 10 in our quarterly, the book of Mark, and the title is The Last Days. And the lesson focuses on signs of the last days that Jesus gave when he was speaking about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And this is recorded in Mark 13, Matthew 24, and Luke 21. And do you all agree with me that we are seeing the final events that are leading up to the coming of Christ? Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So before we go into many of the things there, what signs would you that are you seeing that you feel like are valuable in your journey, things that you're seeing and say, yes, I'm confident we are because this, that, or the other? Are you seeing anything that has been meaningful to you?
Tremendous speed that knowledge is increasing.
Okay, increasing of knowledge. Others? Well, as we go through, if I say some of these and it triggers something that we haven't talked about, then jump in and share with me. But here's some of the things that I'm seeing, and some of these will be from the Mark 13 and the description of Christ, but I'm trying to put them together in a sequence of events and I've tried to order them as I've seen them working through history, because I think Jesus is kind of walking you through how they're going to unfold through time. And so the first I see are the scoffers. 2 Peter 3 and 4, it says, first of all, you must understand that in the last days, scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, where is this coming, he promised? Ever since our fathers died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. In my view, this sign of the scoffers was fulfilled in the late 18th and early 19th centuries during what is known as the Enlightenment, which is the exact counter to what we call the Great Awakening. The Great Awakening was the religious revival with insight and awareness of more knowledge of the prophecies that Jesus is coming soon, and led to the movements that led to the Great Disappointment in 1844. That was the Great Awakening. And to counter the Great Awakening came the Enlightenment, which was the movement towards godless scientific views, human reasoning replacing a belief in God, godless evolutionism, which spread through the world. And in the wake of the godless evolutionism came communism and the other godless philosophies that scoff today at the idea that Jesus is coming again. Not only is the world today filled with scoffers, but the critics of God have come to dominate the scientific, academic, and medical landscape, creating a societal attitude that those who continue to look for Christ's return are somehow less educated, ignorant, or foolish. But those of us who know God and trust the Bible, just as Peter prophesied nearly 2,000 years ago, it is the scoffers that are failing to understand reality. So our first sign, for me, which also sets the time frame for the time of the end, began with the rise of godless evolutionism and the scoffers that began ridiculing the Bible promise that Jesus is coming again. And so the time of the end began in the 18th century, basically, and then we've been moving progressively through. And then we'll go into Mark 13. But When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be troubled, for such things must happen, but the end is not yet. Mark 13:7. In my view, Jesus here is referring to the never-ending regional struggles, tribal wars, crusades, conflicts through the Dark and Middle Ages that will persist and continue to persist through the end of time. The end times, to the end times, and the end times began in the late 19th century, and the end times come after these wars. He says the end is not yet. Notice these wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not yet. So I'm reading that as the end times haven't happened until we get to that point where Peter talked about, where the last days scoffers will come. And so now we're in the last days, and these wars and rumors of wars precede that. And then Jesus continues on with Mark 13:8, and he goes on to say, for nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be earthquakes in various places, and there will be famines and troubles. But these are the beginning of the sorrows. And then Luke describes the same, three different descriptions of Jesus, same words. Here's Luke 21:10 and 11. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences. So he drops in a little additional data point there, pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. And then Matthew 24:7 and 8, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are the beginning of the birth pains. So you put all three of them together, you kind of flesh out the symptoms here. And after the long history of conflicts and tribal wars and rumors of wars through the Dark and Middle Ages, after the Enlightenment, where the scoffers arrived and criticized the Bible, and the rise, then we enter the 20th century. In the 20th century, we have World War I, World War II, nuclear weapons, wars in Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Syria, Ukraine, terrorism around the world. The 20th century, with its two world wars and other military conflict, saw more people killed by war than any other century in human history. And in the past 50 years, the world has seen massive famines, HIV, SARS, swine flu, COVID, pestilences of various kinds, and the increasing frequency of earthquakes, hurricanes, and destructive storms and other disasters. But all of this in the 20th century is the beginning of the birth pains. Think about a woman who's pregnant. When she goes into labor, the time of her delivery has begun. In other words, she's entered the end time of her pregnancy. But the pregnancy is not yet over. But it's the end time of her pregnancy. And the labor is not instantaneous. When a woman goes into labor, the pain gets more frequent, more intense, right up until delivery. And then delivery comes, and there's a release from all the pain, and there's joy and celebration. And that's what we can expect to happen in the world, that these events are going to get more rapid, they're going to get more intense, right up until delivery, and there's no more pain, and there's much rejoicing. Understand, if we're reading these prophecies right, no matter what we do as human beings, things on earth are not going to get better until Jesus returns. Yes or no? Yes. And the worsening of the conditions on earth, get your mind around this now. The increasing labor pains as the earth itself groans under the weight of sin will be used by the scoffers, the Bible deniers, to incite fear, to turn minds away from God, and promote their own godless solutions that will solidify power into a global coalition that actually persecutes the people of God. In other words, these events will fuel the rise of the beast of Revelation as people allow fear to dethrone reason, and they support beastly methods to make themselves feel safe. We saw this happening during COVID. I see it happening in the current election cycle, with many people being influenced by fear, propaganda, misinformation, rather than actual evidence and facts. Why are these things happening? Why? Why does it happen like this? Because God is using power to make it happen? No, because of sin. God is the source of life, health, righteousness. He is the creator and sustainer of reality. One of his design laws is the law of liberty, genuine and true freedom, including the freedom if we choose to separate from him, the source of truth, love, and life. As individuals turn away from truth and love, they become more delusional in their thinking, more irrational, and more selfish in their conduct, more willing to use the methods of the world to force their ways upon others. That's what individuals do. As billions of individuals turn away from God and harden their hearts, they close the spirit temple, their minds and bodies, to the Holy Spirit, and thus the Holy Spirit is slowly withdrawn from the earth by our choice as individuals to harden our hearts against him. As this happens, human evil, chaos, societal disorder, violence, exploitation, abuse increase as the restraining influence of the Holy Spirit is withdrawn. The abuse of the planet, pollution, genetic modification of foods, the numerous industrial chemicals in our water and food, and so much more has a destructive impact on us and nature. As God's presence is withdrawn, Satan also gains more direct control over the forces of nature. He's given more liberty, similar to what you see in the first chapter of Job when God removed some of his restraints. And we see more destructive so-called natural disasters, storms, earthquakes, and manifestation of satanic power. God is not the source of pain, suffering, and death. He is the source of life. But when people reject God and choose life without him, God sadly allows them to reap what they have chosen. And this is what the world experiences before the second coming of Christ. Any questions about that? Do you see how these events, though, and this is a big life lesson here, there are events, there are interpretations of events. Actual events and interpretations of events. What I do in psychiatry all the time is deal with people who misinterpret events. And these events are going to be actively misinterpreted. This is what propagandist machines do. They take events and they twist them, they spin them, they turn them to try and teach something that the events themselves don't actually teach. And we've been living under this in a very aggressive way for the last 6 years or so. It's just unbelievable, actually 8 years almost now. The most aggressive propaganda and mind manipulation that I've seen in my lifetime. And it's going to get worse. And all but the very elect will be deceived. In fact, recently, I've been getting some messages from followers of our ministry who are distraught about the current election cycle and a particular candidate. I'm not going to mention which one because I don't think it's important. But the person's distress is over what they're hearing being said. And I keep trying to counsel, don't look at the words being said, look at the actions being achieved. You know, I can give one example. You'll probably know which way this goes, but just look at the example. There's propaganda out there to be afraid we're about to lose our democracy. Have you heard propaganda like this? Yes. There's a certain candidate who is alleged to be a threat to our democracy. Have you heard this?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that is verbiage. That's words. That's allegation. That's accusation. That is not evidence. If you actually want to see past propaganda, then you have to ask questions. Okay, what is democracy? Our democracy is a democratic republic, meaning we go as citizens with the power of a vote to elect representatives to then function in the role of various, legislators and so forth to pass laws that are enforced by law enforcement and overseen by judges that are also either elected directly or appointed through the elected officials that we give. So the people have a very strong, in a democracy, voice through their election and electors. That's democracy, right? Well, if you look at the two presidential candidates, one candidate actually went through the process of campaigning and getting people to vote for that particular candidate and became the nominee of that particular party through a democratic process. There's another candidate. Did that candidate actually get to be a candidate through a democratic process?
No.
Get your mind around that. That's evidence. Yet the party who's actually practicing democracy is being accused of destroying democracy. Now, I'm not advocating for any party here. This is not a political discussion. It is a discussion on discernment, learning how to see through words and accusations to actually evidences. There are events, there are interpretations of events. How do we interpret those events? Propaganda machines take events and twist them to try and present them to mean something they don't. This happens in the Bible all the time. God's actions, events, historical actions of God are spun and put into context to try and teach things that they're exact opposite of what they teach. Next point. Paul also uses the woman, the metaphor of a woman going into labor about the end times in 1 Thessalonians 5, 1-6. He says, "Now, brothers, about times and dates, we do not need to write to you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, so that this day should surprise you like a thief. You are all sons of the light and sons of the day. We do not belong to the night, nor to the darkness. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be alert and self-controlled." When those who don't know God, the scoffers, the evolutionists, the humanists, the green movement, the earth worshipers, those who are desperately seeking to save themselves and to save the earth, when they're saying, this is the way we can have global peace and safety, sudden destruction's coming as labor pains in a woman, on a pregnant woman. They will be unaware that sudden destruction is coming. But why should they be unaware? Because they have given up a belief in God. They no longer trust Scripture. They have accepted the false narratives of the godless evolutionists and the secular humanists, and they believe peace and safety can be achieved through the implementation of their worldly agenda, through carbon controls and an ever-increasing and domineering of others and freedom-destroying human governments. This is the delusion of socialism, of globalism, of the green movement, that we can save the planet through more government and more controls. They actually claim we can create a new world order in which all nations come together to stop climate change, to stop the destruction of the environment, to eliminate poverty. It's all doable through a new globalism that we can create with new economic realities that will bring in a new era of peace and safety. Have you not been hearing this message?
Yeah, some of it.
It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a propaganda machine that denies God, denies the Bible, denies the reality of where we're going. Satan cannot destroy, and understand this, Satan cannot destroy any soul without the cooperation of that person. And just let that sink in for a minute. Do you get your mind around that? No human soul can be destroyed by Satan without the cooperation of that person. Yes or no?
Yes.
That's right.
Thus, he always works to deceive people into choosing him and his methods. In other words, he works to deceive people to choose to take actions that they think are good, beneficial, helpful, but in actuality are destructive. Eve chose the fruit because she came to believe she'd become enlightened. She would become like God. It would be good for her. Understand that this beastly system rising is not rising under the umbrella of doing evil. It's rising under the umbrella of doing good. Only wanted to save lives, only wanted to save the planet, only wanted to help people. But the methods employed are the methods that are exactly the opposite of the methods of Jesus Christ. There will not be truth, there'll be lies and propaganda. There will not be love for others, it will be empowerment of the elite few and the exploitation of the many. And there will not be freedom, there will be legislative coercion and pressure. Watch the methods. No matter what the issue is, you can spot it. Continuing on with our unpacking, do you see how, as I'm walking through, there's actually a progression through time of these signs that Jesus gave?
Yes.
Here's Jesus again, Matthew 24, 9 through 11. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated of all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Then at the time of the end, at the time after the scoffers arise, at the time when the labor pains have begun, after nations have gone to global war, after the increase of natural disasters and pestilence, then those loyal to Christ will be persecuted, some put to death and hated of all nations. Then people will betray each other to find security for themselves. And what are we seeing in the world today? Currently, Christians in various parts of the world are imprisoned and beheaded. Christians ridiculed for resisting the New World Order, scorned for standing against the restrictions of liberty, hated for holding to the faith of Jesus, vilified for voicing value in God's design for marriage, in healthy, godly parenting, in truth, in the Bible promises that the seasons will remain stable until the second coming of Christ, and in the hope that God and the soon return of Jesus Christ. The governments of the world are becoming ever more dominated by global corporations in the West, communism in the East, Islam in the Middle East, all of which are hostile to Christianity and all moving toward consolidation of power through globalism. Again, observe facts of history. A pestilence originating in a communist country recently was let loose upon the world and was used to incite fear, divide society, increase governmental control, take over $2 trillion of wealth out of the hands of the citizens and put into the corporate hands. Note how the big business and global media cooperated together to advance a narrative to give more power to the few ruling elites while destroying small businesses and the autonomy of the people. See the methods, all under the guise of we're here to help you. We're doing this for your benefit. Recognize the false prophets prophesying about global climate disaster and promoting actions that, again, if we take the actions of the green movement climate prophesiers, those actions will result in more poverty and enrichment of the corporate elites. Empowerment of the few, but at the enslavement of the many. All of this is designed, intended, purposeful, structured to destroy individual liberties. And governments will censor speech, seek to silence voices of opposition in order to form the coalition. Do you see these signs, or do you think I'm just making this up?
Yep. See him.
And then Jesus says in Matthew 24:12, behold, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. This is one of the signs before his coming. The love of people grows cold because of the increase of wickedness. And wickedness is breaking of God's design laws of truth, love, and liberty, breaking of God's methods and principles, acting on the principles of Satan, fear and selfishness. And because when you act on these things, you become more and more invested in these things, and the love is destroyed out of the heart. And wickedness, violations of God's design laws from any source, from the left, king of the south, violations are manifested in the denial of God, in the rise of the lies of secularism, humanism, socialism, evolutionism. And this results in a breakdown of families because of the assault on our common heritage and community values. love is dying in human hearts because of leftism. But from the right, the king of the north, the violations are manifest in false theologies based in imposed law, the rule of law, the God King, the God who is the source of inflicted pain and suffering, to enforce his legal dogmas. This leads to abuses of all kinds that occur under the name of God, whether it was Dark Ages inquisitions and crusades or modern day domestic violence. The design law of worship, by beholding we become changed, tells us that we will become like the God we admire and worship. And if you worship a punishing dictator, you become a punishing dictator. And epidemiologic studies show that domestic violence and child abuse is no different in so-called Christian homes than non-Christian homes. Why? Because the common view of God is that of an imperial dictator. And so the love of many is growing cold from both sides of the equation, because both sides are actually breaking God's design law of truth, love, and liberty. Continuing on, Matthew 24, 37 to 39. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the coming of at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up until the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Incredible if you think about this. The people before the flood knew nothing about what was going to happen, despite Noah preaching for 120 years and building a giant boat. How did they not know? Because they were consumed with pleasure seeking, eating, drinking, marrying, and believing the false prophets of their day. They were too busy either in entertainment or living their lives to be bothered by eternal realities. This is exactly the state of the world today. It is caught up in ever-increasing consumption of mind-altering substances, or leaving reality behind for their preferred fantasy world of video games, social media activities, TV shows, movies, sports, concerts, amusement parks, gender fluidity, animal people, or anything else that denies objective reality and enters into fantasy land. This is the world today. Ignoring the warning signs of Jesus, ignoring the signs of the end all around, and living merely for pleasures of the moment. Jesus continues, Matthew 24, 13 and 14. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. But those who stand firm for truth of God's kingdom of love will be saved. We will be the ones who take the good news about God and his reality-based kingdom of love to the world. We will advance the cause of liberty, for love only exists in an atmosphere of freedom. We will stand for truth in a world of falsehood and propaganda. We will glorify God by revealing his character of love and how we treat our neighbors. We will call people back to the truth of our Creator by teaching people God's design laws, the laws that Creator built reality to operate upon, demonstrating that harmony with God and his design laws are the only way to health and happiness. And we will call people to glorify God, for the hour of his judgment has come, the hour for people to stop worshiping the dictator and start worshiping the Creator whose laws are design laws. The truth about God and his kingdom of love in the face of a world consumed with greed and selfishness, a world using arbitrary laws and coercion of conscience, is the final message to lighten the world for Christ's return. It is the final message of mercy, the message of hope, the message of God's true character of love that Jesus revealed. It is the message that Satan hates, because God's truth destroys Satan's lies, and God's love destroys the fear Satan works so hard to incite. And then we're going to jump to one other sign that you'll find it in this week's lesson. In Tuesday's lesson, it's in Matthew 24. Jesus and his disciples, again, leaving the temple, and he weaves together the destruction of the temple and the final events. And he did this because he didn't only want the disciples to be prepared, but he wanted us at the end of time to be prepared. And this is why he wove these two events together in his description. And then he, as part of Jesus' warning, he says the following, and this is in Tuesday's lesson, Matthew 24:15-16. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Have you ever wondered what the abomination is that causes desolation? No? Nobody?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in AD 70, preceding the destruction of Jerusalem, the Roman army surrounded the city, but then it briefly pulled back. It then came and surrounded the city again, ultimately destroying the city and the temple, not one stone being left upon another. But during the respite, when they pulled back, the Christians remembered these words of Jesus, and they all fled into the mountains and got out of the city, and none of them were killed when Jerusalem was destroyed. This prophecy, Jesus wove together the destruction of Jerusalem and the end time events. I believe that what happened in Jerusalem is an object lesson of the end time events. And I think the world just witnessed, let you know how close we are now. I brought you through the scoffers. I brought you through the wars and rumors of wars. I brought you through the kingdoms against kingdoms and nations against nations and the pestilences and the earthquakes and the famines and so forth and the labor pains that we're in. Now, I'm taking you to the point that we are seeing the equivalent of the Roman army surrounding the temple and now pulling back, and we're in the respite period when we are to flee. I believe the world just went through the equivalent of that first surrounding of Jerusalem in AD 70, and then they pulled back, and we're in that pullback period. And what am I speaking about? Well, the recent worldwide COVID lockdowns, mandates, and tactics used by the coalition of human governments that formed basically overnight, the whole world united to do what? To coerce the consciences of people. And it was a unification of religions of the world, religious leaders of the world, churches of the world, and our own Seventh-day Adventist organization that sided with the government mandates and used their own powers of their own policies and programs to coerce consciences. A whole worldwide lockdown that occurred. And now we're in a time of brief respite. Consider the parallels. Jerusalem contained the temple of the Old Covenant with the Ark and the written law upon it. It was written in stone. In the New Covenant, the law is written where? In our hearts and minds, Hebrews 8:10. In other words, the temple of the New Covenant is the spirit temple, the living hearts and minds of people who love and trust God, not a building made out of stone. That is the temple of the New Covenant. In AD 70, Rome, the power of the state, representing the kingdoms of this world, which are not Jesus's kingdom, surrounded Jerusalem, threatening its destruction. In 2020 to 22, a worldwide coalition of nations, which is not Jesus' kingdom, coordinated an assault on civil and religious liberties, restricting travel, assembly, closing houses of worship, censoring speech, terminating non-compliant people from employment, and coercing people to inject an experimental substance into their spirit temple. The destruction of those who were resistant was threatened, and some were arrested and imprisoned. In AD 70, the Roman army stepped back briefly, and those who trusted Jesus fled the city. And then the Romans returned and destroyed the city and the temple made of stone. Today, we are in the respite. The governments of the world have stepped back their mandates and coercive tactics briefly. And the people of God are to recognize what just happened. We are to hear the warning of Christ and flee to safety. But today, we cannot flee geographically because the final assault of the beastly system is worldwide. There will be nowhere to flee geographically. Yes, those who are in more rural living circumstances will probably have a little bit better time of it than those living in the cities, but that doesn't mean if you're rural that you will be safe. So our flight that we need to take is not primarily geographic. We flee today by leaving behind the organizations and systems that align with and practice the methods of the beast. We are specifically called to come out of Babylon, leave that system behind, leave that imperial, dictator, coercive, rules-oriented enforcement system of conscience coercing methods behind. We sever our heart's affections, commitment, and support for the beastly systems of the world, and we are sealed, settled, aligning our hearts and minds with God and his kingdom of truth, love, and liberty. That's what we're called to do. We present the truth in love. We leave other people free in how they live and treat others. We will not be duped into embracing the methods and coercion and restrictions of liberties in order to save lives. The righteous will not be dominated by fear. They will not seek to protect self, but they will overcome, Revelation 12:11, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They will not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. That's how that we overcome. We are settled and sealed into God's kingdom and will practice only his methods. A worldwide warning has gone out for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. But just like in Noah's day, all of those crying peace and safety through all, they're clueless. They think what we just did was right. It was righteous. It was the good thing. I'm so glad. I hear it still this week. I heard people proclaiming what they did was the best thing we should have done. Sudden destruction is coming, and they don't see it coming. The armies of Satan have shown themselves, and the people of God are to wake up and come out of this imperial law Babylonian system of the world and all other organizations, including religious organizations that practice and support the methods of the beast. We are to live out the principles of God's kingdom, and during COVID, the actions of the righteous were demonstrated by those people who presented the truth as they understood it in love, while always leaving others free to make up their own mind. They refused to mandate. They refuse to restrict liberties. They've refused to silence, to censor, to terminate employment, to coerce in any way. They might have had differences of opinion, but they loved those people with differences of opinion and would not use the worldly methods against them. They would rather lose their own life than become like Satan in character in the way they treat others. We have a brief respite right now before the forces of God's enemies reorganize, and the final worldwide beastly system of coercion is soon to return, just like the Roman armies returned to Jerusalem, with some new justification for the use of ungodly methods upon others. And it will be driven by fear, but also by the claim, so that those in fear can justify they're actually doing something good. It will be under the claim that it's for the greater good, to save lives or to save the planet, even though it's actually not driven by love. It will be claimed that if we love others, then we'll comply. But it will be a lie, a trick to get good people to employ the methods of Satan and how they treat others. And then when you use those methods, you solidify those ungodly methods into your character and you become like God's enemy. So what is the abomination that causes desolation? It is the abomination of satanic lies and methods that desolate the image of God in people. The lie that God's law functions like human law, that leads people to believe God is the source of pain and suffering and death, and causes people to accept as just the use of law and punishment, and they therefore are willing to use those methods on others. As long as they can be persuaded it's for a good cause. Questions about that? So Jesus said in Luke 21 at the end of all this, when these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Don't be discouraged, folks. Think about a woman going into labor. When a woman goes into labor, does she expect the pains to get easier with time or worse? Worse, right? And when she goes into labor, knowing the pain's going to get worse, is she like, oh, man, Lord, can't we put this pregnancy off another 9 months? No, even though it's going to be painful, she's excited for it. How many of us are not excited for the second coming? We're actually just focused on the distress of the days, and we're actually perhaps even praying to delay. How about another more 9 months, Lord? Another more 9 months. Let's put this off. Come on, Lord, bring it on. Let's bring it about. Sunday's lesson. Any questions about any of that? The lesson focuses our attention on the woman who gave her 2 small coins, and Jesus' recognition of this and confirmation that she gave more than all others because she gave with sincere heart all that she had. You're all familiar with the story, right?
Yes.
But the lesson uses this story in a very interesting way. And I want you to we're going to read 3 paragraphs from the lesson. I want you to pay very close attention because I'm going to throw it back to you guys. I'm going to ask you, what do you make of this application of this story? What do you make of it? Why this application? So here are the 3 paragraphs. This story contains a deep lesson about the management of resources. Giving to God's cause does not depend on the action of leaders to have validity. The religious leaders of the temple were corrupt, but Jesus did not thereby affirm withholding offerings. If ever there were corrupt religious leaders, Caiaphas, Annas, those at this time were among the worst, and Jesus knew it too. It is true that leaders have a sacred responsibility to use resources in accordance with the will of God, but even if they do not, those who give to God, the cause of God, are still blessed in their giving, as this woman was. On the other hand, withholding tithes and offerings when leaders do something displeasing means that the giving is tied to their actions instead of being made in thankfulness to God. However tempting it may be to do that, it's wrong. What are they trying to say? What point are they making? It's just a curious application of the story. So how do you hear it?
Keep giving no matter what they do. Yeah.
Keep giving no matter what they do. Well, let's first affirm the point. There is a point to be affirmed that any individual giving from a heart that loves God and others with the intention to advance God's kingdom will be blessed of God. Isn't that not true?
Yes. Yes.
Even if the parties to whom they are contributing use those funds to work against God. The person giving from his sincere heart is going to still be blessed by God, right?
Yes.
As long as the one donating does not realize that the donations are being used to work against God. If they realize the donations are being used to work against the gospel and God's kingdom, then they become responsible for their support of the anti-gospel. Is that not true too?
Yes.
True.
But what about the rest of the message? So there's a truth there. This woman didn't know what the leaders were that were corrupt, and she was giving out of sincere heart, and so she was blessed by that. But what about the rest of the message? Is the rest of the message saying that it really doesn't matter whether the current church, I mean, they have a responsibility to, but for you as the donor side of it, it doesn't matter. That's the leader's responsibility to be righteous or unrighteous. That's on them. Your responsibility is simply give, and you'll be blessed. Don't worry about it.
Well, to me, these 3 paragraphs indicate that they don't understand how reality works. Elijah used 2 words against or for the king, and he said no rain. And the fact that they didn't get any rain for several years essentially destroyed their economy. So when we understand that no rain today means more than just water, but it's the funds, it's the income. If we understand what no rain means, they're trying to convince us that rain or no rain, we're going to go ahead.
Well, aren't they also trying to convince the donor to donate regardless of what you see leadership doing?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's why they got rain when they didn't get rain.
It doesn't matter if the church leadership's righteous or corrupt. You are required to give us your tithes and offerings, and if you don't, you're wrong. That's kind of the way I heard it. Did I mishear it?
Offers. Yeah, offers.
But see, I'm going, At the time of the woman who gave her 2 mites, this was before the crucifixion. At that time in human history, was there any other organized program, movement, church, group, agency that a sincere person could give their tithes and offerings that would be fulfilling of the gospel?
Probably not.
But what about after the crucifixion? Just a few short months later, do you think the apostles in the book of Acts would have directed the believers to continue to give their money to the temple, which still existed? Do you think they would have done that?
No.
That's a good point.
Or in fact, were they taking up offerings rather than telling them to go to the temple? Well, why were they not taking the lesson here from our lesson and saying, hey, Jesus told the woman who gave at the temple she would be blessed. Go give your donations to the temple. Why were the apostles not doing that?
Well, then the Good Samaritan didn't follow the guidelines properly.
What if the apostles had received a message from Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, the local general conference committee, that said, quote, withholding tithes or offerings, even when the leaders do something displeasing, means that the giving is tied to their actions instead of being made in thankfulness to God. However tempting you may be to withhold your tithes and offerings from the temple, it's wrong. Do you think the apostle would have said, the Sanhedrin is right. Let's give our tithes and offerings to them? The application from the story is extremely poor in my view. Rather than taking biblical principle that the tithes and offerings are to be used for the support of the gospel and the mission of Jesus Christ, and therefore believers are to actively seek to return those funds to where God would have them be given, the lesson seems to make the case that we are to return our tithes and offerings blindly to the organized system, even when we know it is corrupt and working against Jesus. Our view at Common Reason is that every person must prayerfully decide where God would have them return the tithes and offerings. If you have followed our ministry for any period of time, you will notice that we never do fundraisers. Have you all noticed that?
Yes.
We don't solicit money from people. We leave people free to decide for themselves under the guidance of the Holy Spirit where they are to return their tithes and offerings. Do you think we're wrong in this, that we should be telling people where they should be giving their money?
No.
Wednesday's lesson is on the Great Tribulation. What are your thoughts or concerns about this? The Great Tribulation. Is there anybody there awake today?
That's right.
Tim, doesn't the
Yeah.
tribulation occur after probation has closed? So therefore, all minds are made up in one camp or the other.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. That's actually not in my notes, and I think it's an excellent point for us to discuss. So thank you for that. Let's keep that right here as we're asking: is the Great Tribulation that of the Dark Ages church abusing the followers of Christ, or is the Great Tribulation something that happens in the future right before Christ comes? Perhaps even, as Russell is saying, after the close of probation, that's the Great Tribulation. What do you think about that?
Future.
Multiple things.
I think it's to come both.
More than one.
Is it one of the dual prophecies
Yeah,
that
dual.
we speak about frequently in here?
Yeah, dual.
I love you guys. Because that's what I think too. I think it's a dual prophecy. Like so many dual prophecies, the former and latter rain and so forth and so on. Yes, I think that is a dual prophecy. I think there was a great tribulation of the pagan and papal Roman church persecuting the followers of Christ that history documents very well occurred. But then I also think there's another great tribulation coming. I think the lesson almost gets this right in the 2 paragraphs in the lesson. I'll read those to you. It says, Mark 13:20 speaks of persecution being shortened for the sake of God's people. Historically, the fires of persecution did lessen after the rise of the Protestant Reformation, shortening the time of distress. As the little horn's power waned, more people joined the reforms. But the little horn would rise in power again, as the prophecy of Revelation 13 indicates. In Mark 13, 21 to 23, Jesus warns of another threat, that of false prophets and false Christs who will rise before he comes back. Jesus warns his followers, beware of them. Okay. The lesson, I think, correctly describes the tribulation that occurred during the Dark Ages under the persecution of little horn power. But from that point on, I think they're confused. They also indicate that there'll be another persecution that comes, and I agree with that. There is another persecution that comes, but I think they're confused about the powers and causes of those persecutions. What do you hear that they're suggesting is the potential cause of the future persecution?
Catholic Church.
The little horn power rises again, and or false Christs and false messiahs or false prophets. What do y'all think about that? What are they missing? Are they missing anything, or do you think, because it's something that's also, I'm pretty confident the lesson authors would believe are true, but they left it out. Who is the ultimate persecutor of God's people in the future? Do we believe that one day Satan impersonates Christ and forms a coalition world government to persecute the saints? Do we believe that's going to happen one day? Yes. So why does the lesson divert our attention away from that grand day towards a local, regional, church power or various prophets and various other false Christs that arise here and there through time?
Tim, people I
Yeah.
have talked to in the church are sitting back waiting for Sunday law to be passed, and then it's time to get alarmed.
I'm going to tell you, a lot of people are going to be confused, I think, when things unfold, because they don't understand methods and principles.
Right.
They're looking for rules.
Right.
They're looking for specific, I know some are watching, the false Christ comes, I'm going to watch the feet. Do y'all know what I mean by the feet?
Oh, yeah, whether they touch the earth.
Whether supposedly they touch the ground or not. That's their security, the feet. Really? You don't think an angel can float above the earth?
I remember being taught that to him years ago.
I know, it's very superficial thinking. It's unbelievable to me. If you think about what Satan did when he tempted Christ, suddenly Jesus is on the top of the Temple Mount. If you're the Son of God, throw yourself off. How do you think they got there? Was it an Uber?
It's very limiting, and it's setting people up to be deceived.
Exactly. And so the Sunday laws, I think, are going to be, I think Sunday law or legislation is one way to coerce consciences, but it is not the only way. We just saw another way to coerce consciences. It's really about watching the methods. Remember, the days are symbolic of systems of governing. That's what they're symbolic of. The Sabbath became a day set apart from the others by creation, by construction, by design, when God, rather than expending and using power, instead ceased using power. And thus the day became holy because it was embodied with the methods of God, truth, love, and freedom. No coercion, no force, no threat, no external use of power to force one's way. The Sabbath is a sign or a symbol of the design law methods of our King and Creator, whose methods are love, truth, and freedom. And that's what it stands for. And it's a weekly reminder that every week we are free in God's kingdom. He will never use his power to force his way. Sunday became a day set apart by the Roman system of imperial law, which requires coercive enforcement. And thus Sunday is a sign or mark of imposed law and imposed punishments. And so many are looking specifically for the day rather than what the days represent. This would be like watching for who's wearing the flag of your nation rather than whose side they're on and what methods they're practicing. So back in World War II, Nazi infiltrators put on American uniforms that had an American flag on the sleeve, infiltrated American lines, and caused all types of chaos. This is what's going to happen because there's going to be people who are going to be using the seventh-day Sabbath as a legal requirement that if you don't keep it, then you're breaking the law, and that requires you to be punished. Just like, I don't know, maybe a carpenter 2,000 years ago who broke their Sabbath laws and deserved to be punished, and they crucified him and needed him off so they could keep the Sabbath. Those Sabbath keepers were actually marked beastly, even though they were keeping the right day. And many Adventists are going to be completely confused by this because they haven't understood what the days represent and symbolize, and they think it's about the rules that you keep. Well, they're actually practicing the beastly method. They're Sunday keepers while they're going to church on Sabbath. If you are worshiping an imperial law God who makes up rules and uses power to coerce or inflict punishment for law breaking and requires the payment of a human blood sacrifice so he doesn't have to kill you, and you go to church on Sabbath, you're actually a Sunday keeper. That's Romanism. That's a Roman god. That is not the Bible of Jesus. That's Jupiter. That's Thor. That's Zeus. That's Baal. That is not the God Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter what day you worship that God on, you are not worshiping the Creator God. And many Adventists are going to be duped by this. And I think our lesson misses this. And they're actually suggesting that the little horn power, which is the head that was wounded in Revelation 13, is going to resurge and claim its power and dominate the world. It's not. Do you remember we've described this? That the beast in Revelation 13 had 7 heads and 10 horns. Does it say the beast was wounded and about died, or does it say one of the heads received a deadly wound? One of the heads received a deadly wound, not the entire beastly system. And so the head that received the beastly wound, those 7 heads represent the 7 false religious philosophies that Satan uses. The 10 horns represent the 10 demonic powers or satanic powers, which are contrary to God's powers and methods. And the 7 false religious systems, paganism and all its pagan, like Baal worship and Ashtoreth worship and Molech worship and so forth, paganism, godlessness, evolutionism, communism, humanism, scientism, godlessness, Eastern mysticism, spirit and ancestor worship, Islam, going back to worship God and the promises through Ishmael rather than through Isaac and the whole system of Islam. False Judaism, after they rejected Jesus, he said, your house is left to you desolate. Understand, up until the time of Jesus, Judaism was the light. But after they rejected Jesus, the Messiah, they're still looking for the Messiah, but he's come. So what they're looking for is no longer light. They're in darkness. It's a false system now. Christianity that became Romanism, that became imperialism, that became the modern day Baal worship, and then false Protestantism, which is all the Protestant churches that are teaching the same Roman imperial law construct. These are the 7 false heads. One of those heads received a wound. That wound was healed, and it's been healed. Yet that head does not lead the world anymore. If you read the rest of Revelation 13, an image to the beast forms, and the image take that back. A beast with lamb-like horns forms an image to the beast. The beast with lamb-like horns is a 2-part prophecy, regional, local, and global, and that image to the beast is the actual beast of Revelation 17. That is the beast that dominates the world, and it's the final end-time beast that is actually run by Satan impersonating Christ. So the little horn power doesn't come to power again. It will be one of the 7 false systems that coalesce together to form the worldwide coalition that is destructive in Revelation 17. And if you'd like more on this, I encourage you to get our magazine on Revelation 13 and 17, where I lay all of this out with the references that you can see how it all connects together. So I think the lesson had a point. There was a tribulation, and there's another tribulation coming. And Yet I don't think they identified the true source of that future tribulation, which is the worldwide coalition set up under the actual dominance of Satan impersonating Christ when he manifests finally in the end. Our gracious Father in heaven, we thank you so much for your love, for all that you provided, for the time in which we live. Well, help us to remember that we see all this stuff. It's not catching you by surprise, that you saw all this coming. You warned us about it. And it is the beginning of the labor pains. And these are the movements that are going to shake people out of their complacency, shake people out of their doldrum day in, day out, just get up and go to work lives and start asking the questions. Hey, what does all this mean? And that you need your friends on the scene to tell the eternal realities of your true kingdom and help people break out of either the godlessness on the one side or the false Roman God king on the other side and come back to worship you who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. We pray for your special outpouring of your Spirit that to enable us to take this message successfully to the world, that you might come soon. We pray in your holy name. Amen.